Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. Those that have been following the news probably saw coming out of Israel this week in the realm of broadcasting, of course, something which I can relate to. The well-known hot cable provider signed a 7-year contract with God TV to launch a Christian station which has missionary programming in Hebrew 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on a channel called Shilano. God TV is based in England and Orlando, Florida, and broadcasts the Christian gospel to some 200 countries around the world. And now they're broadcasting in Israel. Not surprisingly, the Israeli public is outraged at how this could come about, that the cable provider serving 700,000 homes in Israel has become a platform for overt Christian missionary activity in Israel. In Hebrew, Gavriel Sanders he used to be a programmer with us on the air, and you can hear his voice occasionally from time to time. He himself was a former missionary in Israel. That's how he grew up for the first 40 years. He's been behind the scenes on this story since it broke last week in Israel. Gavriel, good to have you back. How you doing?
It's such a pleasure to be here, and I really feel like I should be saying something commercial, listen to Zev Brenner. We'll be back right after these important messages.
But I missed your show. You had an excellent program years ago on the air where you had fascinating interviews. You did a really, really great job. So we hope that eventually you'll come back again. I know you're teaching Hebrew in yeshiva, and you're doing a lot of very important work. You're lecturing about your past, so you certainly should have another book in the offing.
That's definitely true. And do you know that I still get people ad hayom hazeh, to this very day, saying, when is your program coming back? It's amazing that people, I didn't realize how, meaningful that it was, but we did things differently, refreshingly, and edifyingly, and a lot of other nice words that could end up on a Scrabble board.
No, but listen, people, especially today, radio is even more important because of COVID. More people tuning in, more people are home. It's a great way of reaching people, and we live in a multi-platform world. So you need the radio. We broadcast on the internet platforms and social media, whatever you have to do, so it expands the reach. But nothing like good old-fashioned radio, especially during today's day and age. So, before we get to the topic of Israel, you yourself know what it's like to preach, to try to convert Jews. You were a missionary in Israel, so for quite a number of years. So what better person to know what it's like than one who has experienced it, such as yourself?
Well, when certain people speak, whether they're in the evangelical community, the Christian Zionist community, the more overt, let's say, Messianic, whether what are called Messianic Jews, who used to be self-described as Hebrew Christians, but they changed the label in the 60s to go from, Hebrew being in the adjectival position, Hebrew Christian, to now being Messianic Jews, that they're Jews that have a Messianic bent to them. Therefore, they're not Christians. But if you just peel back the Talit, you will find a doctrinal statement and a way of life and a way of belief that mirrors what any conventional evangelical Christian would believe. In other words, I'm saying that underneath the surface, in the heartscape of an evangelical Christian and that of a Messianic Jew, you'll find pretty much identical overlapping belief systems.
Now, is Shilano in Israel, which is from God TV, is it a Christian station in Hebrew or is it a missionary? There is a difference because preaching the Christian religion is one thing and using Jewish symbols and using subterfuge such that the Jews for Jesus does is something else. So what is Shilano TV in Israel?
So there's still a bit of murkiness concerning what the content was of conversations with the cable provider and with God TV. That's not really come out clearly yet. Nobody's been able to get a copy of the contract and analyze it. What has been said in the press, and this has gotten a lot of coverage, I'll just say anecdotally or kind of as an aside, a lot of different disparate journalistic agencies, outlets in Israel have picked up on it. Haaretz has been, Judy Maltz from Haaretz has been all over this thing with several articles in the last 2 weeks. Jerusalem Post covered it. There's been some, not a lot on the right, interestingly enough, because a lot of people on the right are kind of in bed with this community in a strange relationship, and that's another subject. But
by the way, that's a key factor over here, is that there's a good relationship between evangelical Christians and the Jewish community, and for the most part, you don't find them you trying to missionize to the Jews. You don't find Pastor Hagee, for example, gives lots of money to Israel and Jewish causes looking to convert to Jews. Maybe they believe it in their heart, but they're not overly trying to do it. So there's a difference between that and a group that's looking to proselytize and make it their mission to convert to Jews.
So God TV is definitely overt, and they are utilizing it. I mean, they're bringing their own programming from outside. You can call it an ABC Christian television show, just any label, and then using subtitles or dubbing. They're planning to do that, dubbing. They already started broadcasting last week, actually. But the other thread, this patil, as I call it, in the chut mishulash, the threefold cord here, is the use of the local Messianic community, Jews, people who made Aliyah. They either were raised in it or they came at some point to believe the Christian message, but not calling it that. In fact, when I was a missionary in Israel, I remember converting a young lady in the kibbutz in the Ulpan program. I never told her that she was becoming a Christian. I said, you're becoming a fulfilled Jew, a completed Jew, a Messianic Jew. I got kicked out of the kibbutz for that, by the way. Another story. But the nomenclature, the language, what we would call in Borough Park the sprach, that is really critical. And the messaging that's being put out through God TV's Shilano, which is Bemet Lo Shilano, Bechlal Lo Shilano, not at all ours, is a message of deceit and deception. It's not truth in advertising, So when Ward Simpson, the CEO of God TV, stands up and says, Jews don't have to convert. We're not here to convert Jews. He has in his own mind plausible deniability, because in his theological framework, a Jew who believes in Jesus it's the most proper, expected thing for a Jew to do. Now, let's talk about the thing you just alluded to, Hagee and company. So I've defined it. I did a lecture in Yerushalayim in January when I was there, right during the time when all the diplomats were there, and it was rainy, and it was an interesting time. So people came out, and I talked about, among other things, 3 silos of support to Jews in Israel, to Israel in Bechlal. One is the humanitarian, which we all know very well, and we're grateful for. We thank the people. The other is the political support, which we've seen through Christians United for Israel, Kufi or Kufi, however you want to pronounce that, and other groups that, when you look at Huckabee and other personalities who've been on the stage of political influence and leverage, who've done wonderful things for the Jewish people, and what our own president did in terms of moving the embassy, fulfilling something that everybody for years, decades said they were going to do, and finally got it done. But there's a third thread here, a third silo, let's call it, and that silo is what I call proxy support. So we have humanitarian support, political support, but then there's proxy support. What does that mean? Proxy is when somebody else, you give somebody else the job to do for you, and so that's what's happening. The Messianic community, the local indigenous Jewish church is what I'll call it, is large enough now and diverse enough that with all their various expressions, whether it's artistic or tourism or soup kitchens or so many different things, going and visiting elderly. There's a whole issue now with missionaries going and visiting elderly people, Holocaust survivors, giving them Bibles, literatures, befriending them, and wanting to pray with them before they die, so that they'll believe in Jesus, because God forbid that they should die without knowing the Messiah. And this is exactly what Ward Simpson said, that he said, we love the Jewish people, but we know that they are the key to the end of time, and that JC can't return until they believe, because he said in Matthew 23, you will not see me again until you say, Baruch Hashem, Baruch haba b'shem Hashem. He says it in his kind of broken Hebrew. So the theological expectation, it's not just theory. They're engineering this thing on the ground. And so how this happened is just like beyond most people's ken to figure out. But it appears, there's money involved, of course, and there are other Christian programs on there. And I don't know how much they said about, hi, we're here to, if they had walked into the hot office and said, we want to preach Jesus to the Jewish people, can we do that on your channel? I don't know what they said, but I don't think they said that.
I guarantee you they didn't say. They're saying we're looking to have a Christian station on Hot TV. That's what Dalet Adon's, what I would guess they would have said.
They wanted to speak to the Christian supporting audience in Israel and have a presence. So, okay. But when
don't you already have Christian stations in Israel that are on cable TV?
You do. Yes, you've got Daystar, which is a big cable TV. By the way, Hagee, I'm sorry to mention this, but Hagee gave money to put that station. I saw him on God's Learning Channel, Texas, where he said, we have an opportunity to get licensed to put a cable channel in Israel. We're going to preach the gospel 24/7 on the cable channel. Daystar is going to be in there, and I need 1,000 people to give $1,000. I'm giving the first 1,000. Now, who else wants to join with me?
But is it a missionary station or preaching Christian theology and Christian values? There's a difference between that and missionary.
There's a difference, but you've got all the different big preachers, whether it's, guys like, I was going to say Jimmy Swaggart. No, he's not been around for a long time. Kenneth Copeland.
That would be a real messy in this program if he was around.
It'd be a messy program.
He doesn't live anymore. Obviously, it'd be a messy program, right? But no,
see, here's the thing. As you and I said before the program, I'll never know what it's like to grow up in a Jewish home. You'll never know what it's like to be a missionary. Khalilah, you should never know what that's like. But when I hear these guys speak, whether it's from Hagee right on down through, I was trained by one of the big guys in the Christian Zionist world, who's made big inroads into Israel. I won't mention his name, but I was one of his proteges, and I was on pastoral staff of a large church. We had 10,000 members when I left there in the 80s, and he is big. And he's spoken at all kinds of conventions and all days of prayer, all these things. We were coached in how to talk selectively to a Jewish audience so that we wouldn't say things that would offend. Because, Zev, if I said to you, listen, would you like to believe in Jesus so you don't go to hell? You would say, get out of my face, Sanders, right? But if I were to say to you, do you realize that Jesus was Jewish? He was born in Bethlehem. All his disciples were Jewish, and New Testament's a Jewish book, and that real primitive Christianity, early church Christianity, they were all Jews, and that form of Christianity is really the natural extension of your Judaism, and that Christianity got off the derech with the Catholic Church, and that your Judaism got off the path with Rabbinic Judaism, and the reason you've been persecuted and hounded all these years is because you've been disconnected from God's real plan. So if you just believe in Jesus, you'll replug into the truth, you'll be energized, and real Christians and real Jews are from the same bolt of cloth. Whoa, that's the message here, is that your distinction as a Jew is really more cultural, but the real deal here is your eternal soul, and it's going to spend eternity, as burnt toast. If you don't turn, you're going to burn. So that's the message.
Before we break, Gavriel, how many people in Israel have actually been converted to Christianity? What are the numbers? Do we have any figures?
There are no hard numbers because there's nobody that can monitor that. That's something that happens like when I was on the kibbutz years ago and sitting on the edge of a cotton field with a couple of other Christians and this Jewish girl from North Hollywood, California. That wouldn't be registered anywhere. What I can tell you is this. If you just look at the trajectory of the local Messianic community, when I was there in the 80s, it was about 5,000 people, and there were roughly 30 or 40 various outlets, from freestanding buildings to a lot of house or apartment types of fellowships. Now it's over 30,000, roughly about 30,000 in size, with some 250, let's call it, various types of buildings, from the Narki Street Baptist Church in Yerushalayim to the Dugit Cafe in Tel Aviv, to there's a King's College, which is a Bible college for this, and then all kinds of centers all over the country. So it's huge. So there's enough there now for the Christian money, from the evangelical money, to come in, support these groups, for them to do the work, because they're Israelis now. They're not missionaries coming from outside. This is a missionary community that's been cultivated from within. And that's, as they say in Hebrew, kan kavu hakelev.
Is that 30,000 Jews, or is it the United States of Jews for Jesus has a mixture of Christians and Jews?
Well, you bring up a great point. A recent study by Jews for Jesus on the profile of North American Messianic congregations. 75% of North American Messianics are intermarried, okay? And it doesn't follow through into the second and third generation. In other words, the Messianic kind of flavor doesn't necessarily follow through. So and this is just before we break, why I think this is such an alarmist thing is because we have an issue here that goes to Jewish continuity. We have an existential threat here as far as assimilation and, in the name of, you can have both worlds, wear a yarmulke, have a shrimp burger, it's like.
Right, and they wear tzitzis on the missionary programming too, some of them.
There are at least 200 Messianics in the IDF. That I know from one of the Messianic websites that works with them, helps them, provides them support. There are, and this is a scary one, there are Messianics in the Hasidic community. There are some not well known, even right here in Borough Park. So
hold on. I want you to pick up on that point, because Messianics in the Hasidic community, question mark. I want to pick up on that point. Before you became converted to Judaism, how many Jews did you convert to Christianity?
Well, I never kept any hash marks on my sleeve. I can tell you that in the big church that I was part of in Southern California, of 10,000 members at the time I was there, I did a quick survey, kind of an estimate of anywhere from 400 to 500 Jews in that church. Now, that is a significant size shul, as you know. So in the constituency that I worked with, we had quite a number. And so how many did I know of several. I mean, if it was 10, 15, 20, I don't know. One is too many. Right. I performed more than one kind of intermarriage, including one with a chuppah and breaking the kos, and guys there in a yarmulke and a talit. It was an interracial marriage. It was an interreligious marriage. It was, and I'm there feeding, sprinkling in Hebraic things into the ceremony. It was, when I look back on it, I just wince with pain. But there was a dawning and an awakening. I should just mention this point, I guess. One of the things we did when I was in the church many years ago was I said to my staff, we're going to have Passover, because I want our members here, the group that I was involved with, about 600 people, that was my department, I want them to see JC in the Passover, because that's a big thing that Jews for Jesus does, and Chosen People Ministries out of Coney Island Avenue. They do this whole presentation of how to see JC. So I brought in a missionary, that fellow by the name of Eliezer Urbach. Allah Shalom, he's no longer with us. He was one of the big leaders in the American Board of Missions for the Jews, which became Chosen People Ministries. And we did. Now, how many nights of Pesach do we have? How many Seders, how many Starim do we have in the Galut? 2. How many did we do? 4. This was a real spin on Shnaim Shehem Arba. And so anybody who knows a little bit.
Maybe they celebrated Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, at the same time as the first one. Who knows? And we doubled it up just in case there was a suffix. So, but Eliezer came in and he did these 4 nights, with this great treif meal that we all had. I had 150 people a night in this building that we used to be a restaurant that was part of the church campus. And he stood up and he talked about how the 3 pieces of matzah represented, the Ahab, the Ben, the Ruach HaKodesh. And the middle one, the middle matzah, the Ben is taken out, it's broken, and look, there's stripes on the matzah. There were stripes on his back when the Romans whipped him. And look, there's holes in the matzah. Those represent the holes in his hands and his feet when he was on the cross, Didn't they teach you this? You didn't get this at Yosef? What's the matter? And so it's uncanny. And of course, the Afikomen, which is taken, hidden away, it's almost in a shroud, and then it comes back. That's resurrection. Or the second coming. You can see the innuendos and the nuances that are woven into this, and all the Jews who they just kind of grew up with, like a lox and bagels Jews, They ate it up.
And they were going, wow. And the Christians are going, wow. So there's been this drawing since the 60s, really, this drawing of Jews into the Messianic movement, but also Hebraic influences into the Christian church. Is a huge movement known as the Hebrew
don't some of them wear talesim? They wear prayer shawls. Yes. I'm not even talking Messianic congregation. I'm talking about some regular congregations will incorporate Jewish symbols. I've seen,
yes. Yeah, for sure. Part of it is because they recognize that a lot of their own customs come from pagan sources,
And I might add, there's a fellow, a religious Jew, he wrote a book, I forgot his name, about living a Christian lifestyle for a while. He went to different Christian churches. I even think some of the churches bought our scroll Chamashim, according to what he said.
You're talking about Benjamin Cohen,
right?
Who's a friend of mine. He used to be my editor when we had an online magazine called Jews Week many years ago. So I was one of the senior religion correspondents for him. And he did that. He wrote a book called My Jesus Year, and he had a sock. He was coming to be able to go do that, and he went around all these places and he wrote up what he saw. He didn't participate in this, whatever. It's a whole sidebar issue here, but what it indicates is that there's curiosity really on both sides as to what's happening behind those doors over there. What's in that shul? What's in that church building? You know, so
and has your experience, was that helped you bring you to Judaism? This fact that you studied some Hebrew, studied some custom, even though you're looking and you converted people from Judaism to Christianity, but at the end of the day, did that help you make the transition from Christian to Jew? From evangelical Christian proselytizer to Jewish counter missionary?
Yes, I've never liked the term counter missionary because I don't like things that are negative. I really define myself as like a missionary awareness consultant, an MAC, Big Mac. So I'm really just one to try to point out where there are disconnects or where there are theological issues that represent distortion or misunderstanding. Really. A lot of this comes from misreading things. Just like, the Rabbi Tovia Singer, for example, I think you've run across him once in a while.
He also used to do a radio show for us years ago.
Yeah. So it's amazing. So everybody's gone through Zev, the launching pad. So Tovia talks about, many times I've heard him talk about this, that God allowed the Mormons to be formed so the Christians would know what Jews feel like. Because the Mormons say that they are the ultimate legitimate form of Christianity and everybody else is wrong. And so along come the Christians to the Jews, whatever stripe they might be, if they're wearing a talit or if they're...
And including the Mormons too.
Including the Mormons. We remember that big story in the 80s, all right, back on Har Zitim. And they're saying we are the arbiters, we are the conduit of truth. And so the Jewish people, which appears stubborn and resistant and saying thanks but no thanks, says, we were at Har Sinai. We're coming up on Shavuot, shortly. We were at Har Sinai. Our parents, our grandparents, our bubbies and zadis, our altar bubbies and zadis, going all the way back, they didn't lie to us, and we heard the word, and you didn't. You got a story. And so while your ancestors were worshiping in Druid, dancing around Druid and Celtic fires, we were steiking, as it were. So the fact that my background included 4 years in Israel and really when people say, well, what was the one thing that convinced you to become a Jew? And I say, well, it was cholent, really, it was an amazing thing. But it was a cholent as far as an answer because it was a blend of various things.
It was a spiritual cholent.
It was a spiritual cholent, absolutely. But Hebrew was really the big catalyst because it gave this guy, it gave Sanders a lens through which to look at the Jewish Bible in a way that I never could have in the many years that I went to Bible college to get my degree in God. My degree in the Bible. I thought I knew everything about God. So I keep trying to put this to the side in my life, but it keeps coming back. And this thing with God TV and the Shilano channel, which is Mechlalo Shilano, it just came to the fore, and I'm part of this interesting coalition, of this, as I mentioned, this. You could never find something so polarized on other issues, but on here it's united. And through the various efforts that we've been doing, through getting out information and through videos and a lot of stuff that I've fed to you earlier about all this, we're really, I think, seeing an amazing thing happen, and that's here are concerned people who can come together and demonstrate Shevet Achim Gam Yachad, who can represent true Achdut over something that is an existential threat to the Jewish people. I wish it weren't, but Christians don't realize it because they come with all their love. And Zev, when I was in the kibbutz, I was operating in 4 kibbutzim, right? And I said, I love the Jewish people. I was interviewed by the Jerusalem Post years ago. And I said, you know what? Real Christians love Jews. Because the guy said, what do you do with all the Christian history? The pogroms, Inquisition, all these other things that happened.
But those aren't evangelical Christians. That's a different brand than the Catholics.
That's right. That's it. That's what I said to him. I said, those weren't real Christians. And he said, so you're saying to me that a sign of a real Christian is love for Jews? I said, absolutely. And he said that for most of Christian history, Jews weren't loved. Yes, he said, didn't you realize what you just said? You said for most of Christian history, there haven't been real Christians. That's what you're saying.
And that's what they believe. They don't listen to, unlike Judaism, we have Reform, Conservative. We believe they're different strands of Judaism, but we don't say they're different religions completely. While in Christianity, it's a vast difference between a Catholic and a Protestant and evangelical. So it's a whole different strata and structure. But I heard this from one Christian evangelical Christian, and it was a brilliant idea. He said, listen, if we believe we have to witness to everybody. If we witness to everybody and don't witness to the Jews, that's anti-Semitism. A brilliant thought on his part.
Well,
you've heard that, right?
I understand the heart behind it because he's thinking that, what's more important, your temporal happiness or your eternal soul before God. Okay, so now we're getting a little theological. And I did this. I was a street preacher. I was on the campuses. I did all this stuff back in the 60s in the early Jesus movement. I was part of all that. I still think that way. It was like having a language. I know exactly the nature of the thought process. So I appreciate the concern. But as I've said to them, I said, you're telling me if I don't believe in your Savior, whom you say is my Messiah, and the Moshiach, the Savior of the world. You say, if I don't believe in him, I am hellbound. That's my eternal destiny. Is that correct? And if you press them, they'll tell you that. Mostly they don't like to talk about that subject. Two subjects they don't like to talk about, and this is true of all missionaries, evangelicals, Christian Zionists, Messianic Jews. They don't want to talk about hell, and they don't want to talk about the deity of Jesus, that he is in their eyes the second person of something called the Trinity, Hashilush in Hebrew, and that he was God in the flesh, which is an idolatrous concept way back in Judaism. It's mamish paganism. They don't talk about that, okay? But they say God had to come into the world, become one of us as a perfect human, become the perfect sacrifice. Which, do we believe in human sacrifice? Absolutely not. That he shed his blood for the sins of the world. So all I have to do now, if I believe, I'll receive the credit of his righteousness upon me, because all of us have gone astray. We've each one to his own way. We are like lost sheep. We are all sinful, and that there is none righteous. No, not one, according to the New Testament. So the priority then in world evangelism is we got to reach all the world with a message, bring them to faith, and then there'll be peace in the world when there's peace, first of all, in the human heart. And so I said all these things. They say all these things out of Yom Hazeh, but the thing that's a little bit different today is that the amplitude, the magnitude of the support that they're giving, on the one hand, to Jewish organizations through groups like Rabbi Eckstein, Alav Shalom's operation with the International Fellowship of Christian Jews.
They raised hundreds of millions of dollars from Christians.
Amazing. $1.3 billion he raised. And I knew we weren't really friends, but we certainly knew each other. We'd call each other once a year, whatever, talk. And I see the tremendous great stuff that's going on, but here's the problem. And there's a real need for something here. There's a need for a sort of a kashrus, if we could say it that way, some kind of a kashrus organization that says, okay, here are the lines of relationship, and we don't step over them. What's that in the Jewish agency?
But they know, we have a few moments left, they know they're not supposed to proselytize, and those groups generally, as a rule of thumb, don't. The channel we're talking about is not part of the Hagee network or the other networks that are out there that are helping and supportive of Jews. You have women like Lori Cardozo-Moore, I forgot her, who's on television quite a bit. She goes to the United Nations. She actually is halakhically Jewish on both the mother and father's side, but she's a strong supporter of it. You have a lot of those Christian evangelicals that are strong supporters that are not missionizing. The problem is those rogue few that do, that have lots of money behind them. But but my question before I let you go is are there Hasidic missionaries in Borough Park?
Yes, there are. There are a few there. Not a lot. But there are a few. There's some in Israel as well.
How do they get away with that? They dress like Hasidim? What is it?
Well, usually these are people that, I can't say a lot about it because it's something that is being dealt with very quietly. And of course, given the insular nature of the community. But you have people that are disaffected who, and this is one of the kind of the downsides, they would say, of the internet. And they start talking to somebody or reading something, or they hear a story of somebody else who was OTD off the derech and found some meaningful kind of lifestyle and acceptance in an accepting community. Listen, in my church in Southern California, if you were Jewish, you were a minor celebrity. So if you grew up in a community where ostracism and low self-esteem was part of your upbringing, wow. We certainly healed that. You didn't have to go to a therapist. You had us to tell you are God's chosen.
That's love bombing.
Yes, it's love bombing. It's exactly what it is. But you said something, I just want to backtrack for just a moment, because I know you want to make a distinction between these people over here that are supporting Israel and these few over here. And I'm speaking to you as an insider, one who would know, and I have no agenda to do anything other than just to tell the truth the way I've understood it and experienced it. There is no ideological difference between John Hagee and the guys on God TV. Hagee has come up with a really brilliant way of dealing with things. And there are, I know some of the people he supports in Israel. I spoke just to a wonderful fellow from a big organization in Jerusalem that helps 12 different communities. And there are a lot of great stuff going on, but behind the scenes there is proxy support for groups like the Messianics now, because they don't have to be frontal about what they're doing. They can come around through on the side, parallel, b'makbil or b'akbala, as we say in Hebrew, and do it that way. And they are doing it. The churches are growing. Messianic congregations are growing all over Israel. They do concerts now. They're very high profile. They're out and about it. I can't say who, but there's somebody inside of the Prime Minister's own infrastructure who is a big missionary, big Messianic. There's an attorney. They've got attorneys now, big ones. I mean, they're fighting this thing with God TV.
And they have a lot of money, but isn't the government going to be shutting it down to thinking about it? Hasn't reached a level where there's been some talk about the fact that a missionary station shouldn't be allowed to broadcast this against the rules? So isn't there some movement to stop it?
So let's talk about what the rules are for just a moment, because everybody says, well, it's illegal to proselytize in Israel, right? Well, no, there are two things. You can't offer someone a material incentive to convert, like if you convert, become part of our church, we'll send your kid to college in the United States, or we'll provide you with a stipend, or whatever. You need a car, you need a toaster oven, a microwave. That you can't do. The other thing is minors. You can't proselytize to minors. So when it comes to issues of religious freedom, for example, everybody's, I just read today from a piece from Ron Cantor, who is a Jewish guy, head of a congregation in Tiberias. And he works with God TV, has a program every day on God TV around the world. And he was saying, well, the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, Well, every country has laws to protect children, right? Children can't watch just whatever they want. Movies have ratings on them, and there's filters in homes sometimes, hopefully all Jewish homes. There's on cable boxes or whatever the settings are. Parents there are parental controls on devices, smartphones and things like that. So this for a reason. So this is coming in unfiltered to any kids. We have a moment left. The basic thing that they're using Jewish symbols to confuse people, to proselytize. Hineni Ministries was patterned after Rebbetzin Jungreis. This is done with an intention. So that's where the real problem lies. And if they're doing that, they should be shut down. But if people want to get more information, they want to contact you, how can they do so? How can they learn more? Very easy. And there's a meeting on the 19th, by the way, for the Council of Cable and Satellite Broadcasters on this issue. Just Gavriel Sanders at gmail.com. Gavriel Sanders at gmail.com. Very easy. Gavriel Sanders, thank you for being on the forefront. I know that you, as being a former missionary, you're well attuned to what's going on, especially in the broadcast world and the Christian broadcast world, to proselytize. So thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your leadership. We look forward to having you back again. Yes, Shem Zev, bracha v'atzlacha, and have a wonderful time counting the Omer up to receiving Torah all over again at Har Sinai. Thank you. We're going to be right back.